Okay, we might just wait a few seconds for everyone to come into the webinar today. I think we're all nearly all in. So we might make a start then. So hi everyone, a very warm welcome to our Sleep Health Week webinar. And this one is titled Sleep as a Lifelong Superpower. Now, my name's Samantha Bromwich. I'm a sleep scientist and a PhD candidate down here in Tasmania. And I'm so pleased to be hosting today's session on behalf of the Sleep Health Foundation. Before we begin, the Sleep Health Foundation acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the traditional owners and to elders both past and present. At the Sleep Health Foundation, we draw inspiration from our First Nations people's view of health that is a holistic issue and a whole of community issue. Now, a little about why we're here today. So this webinar is part of Sleep Health Week, which is held each year to raise awareness among the general public about the importance of sleep for our health and wellbeing. This is the second webinar in our 2025 Sleep Health Week series, and this year's theme is Sleep as a Lifelong Superpower. So it's a simple idea that sleep supports our brain health, emotional balance, learning, physical health, and overall well-being across every stage of life, from infancy through to older age. So the Sleep Health Foundation is a community-facing not-for-profit organisation. Our mission is to make accurate evidence-based information about sleep accessible and meaningful to everyone. And that's really what Sleep Health Week is all about. I also want to emphasise that today's conversation isn't just for professionals or researchers, it's really for anyone interested in sleep. So that includes carers and those living with sleep challenges themselves. You're absolutely part of this conversation and always front of mind in what we do. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we get into it. Today's webinar will run for about 45 minutes. We'll have a live Q&A at the end, so feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar, and we'll answer all those at the end. And the webinar will also be recorded, so that'll be available if you want to rewatch it or share with others later on. Now, we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers today, including experts in paediatric sleep, digital health, psychology, and an advocate with a powerful lived experience to share. So let's get started. Our first speaker today is Associate Professor Jasneek Chawla, who will be sharing insights into how sleep affects children and adolescents and why establishing healthy sleep habits early in life is so important. So welcome, Jasneek. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into the sleep field?
Sure, thanks, Sam. Yeah, so as you said, I'm a paediatric sleep and respiratory doctor in Brisbane, and I'm also part of the Australasian Sleep Association board and the incoming president for the organisation. How did I get into sleep? Through basically coming over to Australia from the UK for a sleep fellowship and just realising that it was something I felt really passionate about and really enjoyed and could see the difference you could make to the lives of children and families through improving sleep.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to have you here today. So I guess the first question we've got for you are, what do you think are the biggest challenges you see in children's sleep today?
I could probably answer this over the whole of my time, but I think probably the biggest challenges are that we have really busy lifestyles, and I think sometimes people forget that it's really important to deliver the health message about the importance of sleep from a really young age, and that actually sleep really does impact on how children function. I think the other real big challenge that we see is that we focus a lot on a child that has a sleep problem, and perhaps we don't always acknowledge that it's the whole family that's actually disrupted. So I think, ensuring that we actually think about the whole family unit when someone has a sleep problem is something that's a big challenge for us. I think probably the last thing that I'd say as a challenge is that it's probably quite an unrecognized health issue in pediatrics in children. And I think sometimes, particularly in vulnerable populations, I do a lot of work with children with disability, for example. People think it's something they just have to live with and just have to get on with. So I think recognizing that we really do have a challenge in ensuring people realize that they can improve sleep in kids, and that there's lots of things we can do to help.
Yeah, fantastic points. It's recognizing that sleep can be, yeah, an issue and that there are things that can help, out there as well. Fantastic. And so how does poor sleep in childhood affect learning and development?
Yeah, so this is actually an area that's been a huge a huge field of study in sort of pediatric sleep or in children's sleep over the past decade, I would say. We now have really good evidence that poor sleep is linked to poor academic performance, so that children who actually have worse sleep don't have as good cognitive function. We also have studies that have really shown that it impacts on behavior. And I think more and more now we're getting studies that show the impact on development and early development. Some examples of that is studies that have shown that if you have sleep disruption from a condition like obstructive sleep apnea in a child who has a disability, for example, it really can impact on their ability to learn things like speech and verbal skills. So we've got some really good studies now that show that sleep is actually crucial for functional outcomes in children. And that's not just looking at sleep disruption, but also ensuring that you're getting the right amount of sleep as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it can also impact on physical development as well, kind of poor sleep, not only
Absolutely.
the brain, but the body as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so important for growth. It's so important for metabolic function, really for a lot of your things that you're learning. And it's in children, it's such a crucial thing because there's so much that's actually happening. Sleep is so active when you're a child, particularly, but for everyone.
Mm.
And I think that we sometimes forget that.
I think we do. Sometimes we think sleep is just where we all switch off, isn't it? But there's actually a lot going on while we're all sleeping. Yeah. So I guess if we think about adolescence and sleep, are there any particular things that come to mind about harms in the adolescent stage?
Yeah, I think adolescents are a real risk group for us for a number of reasons. I think one is purely a lifestyle thing that I think they're transitioning from being, a child into adulthood. And I think they're a really vulnerable group because they're exerting their independence, they're changing their lifestyle habits. They've got a lot of pressures. There's peer pressure to do things. There's school pressures. There's a need to want to kind of explore social parts of their life. And I think that sleep sometimes is what's neglected, or which is what's kind of put to the side for many adolescents because they're too busy and they want everything else. There's so much happening in life at that stage. I think the real concern with that is that there's some really good evidence now that poor sleep in adolescence is linked to increased suicide level, increased risky taking behaviors, impact on mood, anxiety, depression. All of these things are interlinked. And I think, there's a lot of concern that we're seeing a lot more mental health issues in adolescence that could be linked to sleep as one of the major factors that we can actually modify. So it's not so much that it's the cause, but it's something we can actually make better that could help improve those mental health challenges that we see many adolescents face. I think the other big one that I can't kind of go past mentioning in adolescence is screens. It's really the point at which screens become a real, we're in a digital era where everything is about screens. And we really need to think about our messaging to adolescents, because just telling them, no, you can't use a screen isn't going to work. We've got to think about how we have a conversation and compromise that, but also ensure that we're promoting good habits. So I think that's a real big one as well.
Yeah, yep, no, exactly. And I mean, speaking of habits, we think a lot about routines in childhood and adolescence as well. So, do you have any practical advice for parents struggling with bedtime routines or wanting to improve that within their whole household?
Yep. I think, the first thing to say is that you're not alone if you're struggling. There's lots of people struggling, with kids and sleep. It is a challenge for every family at some stage. I think that the biggest message is what you just said. It's consistency of routine. So I think you want to get that message into kids really early. But there are different ways in which you can do that, and it's thinking about what works for your child. What do they respond to? Are they a child that, likes visual cues? Are they a child that likes stories? Are they liking play? How can you incorporate those things to actually help them learn sleep routines? I think it's really important to think of sleep as developmental, and to remember that, children are learning sleep, and we've got to teach them those things things, how we can use rewards and incentives and things to do that. So I think consistency of routines, good light exposure, exercise, all of these things are really important, you know, and then having a healthy kind of, I suppose, just promoting healthy behaviors around sleep, making it something that they enjoy.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, we are just about out of time, Jazz, but is there anything else that you wanted to, let our viewers know? Any other key sort of takeaways from sleeping in children and adolescents?
No, just that what I said really, that I think
Yeah.
we're not alone. You know, this is a huge problem. We know that, you know, children, it's really common for children to have sleep problems at some point. And I think that, you know, just remembering that and thinking about what your child responds to can really help you think about how you help them with sleep.
Yep. Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much. That was really insightful. And I think hopefully, yeah, we've covered a lot of content, and I know there would be so much more that we could go over, but in this short space of time, I think we've covered some of the key sort of topics. So thank you, Jazz.
Thank you.
All right. Well, our next speaker today is Professor Christopher Gordon. And so he's going to be talking to us about the importance of sleep in the middle years of life between the ages of 18 and 65. Welcome, Chris. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the sleep field?
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and welcome everyone. Even though we can't see you, I hope you're enjoying the webinar and I hope you're going to get some benefit from it. I got into the sleep world because I was a physiologist that did a PhD in temperature, and so I came to a sleep group and said, I think I can help you. And they sort of said, maybe, and then I started from there. So I had a very circuitous route to get there, but I've enjoyed it immensely since.
Fantastic. I think a lot of people who get into sleep have a bit of a circular way, don't they? It's never a direct path for most of us. Okay, so if we're thinking about the middle adult years, could you tell us a bit about how lifestyle issues in the middle years start to affect health by disrupted sleep over time?
Yeah, so as Jazz says, we tend to think of children and adolescence as this tremendous area of change. And I like to think of the midlife as being the accountable years where you've got to be responsible and you've got to look after other people as opposed to people looking after you. So you've got these really conflicting things that can influence it can influence your health and influence your sleep health as well. So there's the biology of aging, and that changes sleep over time. There's a common misperception that we get less sleep when we get older, which is not true. We tend to stay the same, but it might be more broken and disrupted. But our sleep health, as in the Sleep Health Foundation, can be affected by lots of things. So we have economic drives of owning mortgages if you can afford one in Australia. We have family commitments. We have work-life balance. We have family. And my colleagues taught me about the sandwich generation. So you're between the children you're looking after and the grandparents as well. So you feel sandwiched in between it, although that's not meant to be a negative connotation. So there's lots of things that can cause disruption to people, and it can affect their health and sleep health. And often, I believe, and I suspect my colleagues do, is sleep is the one that gets missed because people go, oh, you know, I'll just have less sleep. I'll be able to cope. I'll get up early. I'll go to bed late. And that's what we're here today to talk about, you know, better sleep health.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess this is the time we spend most of our life in all these years. So things can crop up, over time. It can be worse at some stages throughout adulthood and better in other times. So it can vary quite a bit, I would imagine. And so in terms of looking after our sleep health, like diet and exercise, why would you say it's important to look after this kind of thing in middle adulthood?
Yeah, so we've started using the word sleep health deliberately rather than sleep because you have to work at it. It's like a pillar of health, like diet and exercise. So we talk about people exercising to maintain fitness and not being sedentary. We talk about people eating a balanced diet so they don't get overweight or malnourished. We should think of sleep the same way. We should think of it from a health perspective about how it can affect our health and how other factors can affect it. So we need to work at it. We need to look at when we're going to sleep, when we're waking up, where we're sleeping, what the condition of our environment is, really thinking about that because in the 40s, in the mid-years, that's when we start seeing an increase in conditions like insomnia, which has a whole risk profile associated with it. We have increases in sleep apnea, and that both of those disorders, which are fairly prevalent, increase with aging, and so the risk is there. I could point to a study, which I'm not trying to make everyone scared, but there was a recent study released from 88,000 people in what's called the UK Biobank. It's a study been going for years, and they followed people over about 7 years, just under 7 years, and they found that sleep traits are associated with up to 172 diseases. Now, let me just be cautious. It doesn't mean if you've got one of these sleep traits, you're going to get this disease, but it's showing the importance of sleep. And that's really this midlife population we're talking about.
Yep, yep. And so thinking about sleep health, and we want to try and focus on that, how can we balance that, between catastrophizing about sleep loss and disrupted sleep in these middle years of our lives?
Yeah, so I just felt as though I catastrophized it by saying that, 88,000 people are at risk, which is not what I was meaning to intention. What I was trying to say was about the sleep health and about the importance of it through a health paradigm. The problem really is the media, I've got to be honest. The media catastrophizes. You can't go a week without reading or seeing on television or hearing. We're in a sleep crisis. We're in a sleep pandemic. We're all sleep deprived. The reality is that it's not really true. What there is there's problems with sleep in percentage of people. And if you don't look after those, they can get worse over time. So the example might be, I've got some symptoms of insomnia and I don't really pay attention to it, and it can develop into a more chronic condition over time. But you need to work at it, but not be influenced by saying, I'm going to die because I'm not sleeping 8 hours a night. That's just not true, right? There's a whole bunch of things we do know. The biggest change that I feel has happened is really the digitalization and the globalization of the world. And that's meant that we're all on. And so things like this, if you can see it, you can't see it, the smartphone and other things like that means that people are having maybe changes to their sleep quality. So not just looking at how long you've slept for, saying that my quality of my sleep is not as good, I'm not as refreshed, I'm not as restored the next morning, my day is affected, and then that has this downstream sequela that go from there.
Yeah. And so we've just got a couple of seconds left, but did you want to mention anything about sleep trackers and how they can help or not?
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with sleep trackers because increasingly people are using them. The sales have gone up since the pandemic and they've continued to go up, so that people have said there's not going to be as many. People are buying them all the time. I suspect some of my panel members have a smartwatch on right now. What they need to do is taken into consideration. So think of it as an aid, but don't think of it as something that's saying this is exactly what my sleep is. They're not as accurate as a sleep study, so it's guesstimating at best, but think of it that's something that can help with looking at your regularity of sleep, the duration of sleep, but don't overly get obsessed with it. There's actually a term called orthosomnia, which is related to people obsessing about the sleep they get from devices. I'll just finish by saying the best indication of your sleep is how you feel in the morning and how you subjectively rate your sleep. That's one of the best things that people can do rather than looking at numbers and getting obsessed with them.
Perfect. That's a great way to end, Chris. Thank you so much. You've shared heaps of information there. We really appreciate your insights. Thank you. Okay, so our third speaker today is Associate Professor Melinda Jackson, who will be speaking about the ways sleep impacts our brain health and sharing some practical strategies for managing sleep challenges, particularly in older adulthood. So welcome, Melinda. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the sleep field?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's really exciting to be able to speak to this topic. I work at Monash University. I'm an academic and a psychologist and run the Sleep Cognition and Mood Laboratory here. And I got into sleep, I guess, as an undergraduate student in psychology. I started working at a sleep lab, testing people for sleep apnea. And I guess I got fascinated by this essentially respiratory disorder that the patients would often report they had problems with their memory or their mood and these daytime impacts that, were really affecting their brain health. And so as a psychologist, I was fascinated by that interaction. So that sort of took me on a trajectory of understanding the impacts of sleep disorders on the brain.
Yeah, fantastic. So I guess that leads straight into our first question for you is what does the research say about sleep in older adults and how it does affect our brain health?
Yeah, so we know that sleep definitely changes as we get older. As Chris pointed out, we don't necessarily think that people need less sleep as they're older, but we certainly see changes in their sleep architecture. So they have, less deep sleep, much more light sleep, maybe more broken sleep and more easily woken. And so that is just a natural change that can occur. And sometimes it's thought that that might be because of the impacts on the brain's internal body clock, where we're just not so we're not so sensitive to the signals that help to direct when we're feeling tired and awake. And that can lead us to sort of going to bed earlier or waking up earlier in the morning as well. These sort of circadian changes that we see. Sometimes people, as we get older, might have more opportunities to nap as well, and that can impact on our next days or next night of sleep. And more commonly as well, we see an increase in sleep disorder prevalence as well, things like insomnia and sleep apnea in older adults. So around half of older adults over 65 will have some type of sleep disorder. So that's obviously impacting on their sleep. And then there's things like medications and medical conditions that can increase as we get older as well. Things like pain and arthritis, cardiovascular disease, all of these things can disrupt people's sleep. But I also want to point out that often as we get older, we may have more caregiving duties as well. We might be looking after family members or a spouse. And that is another way that our sleep can change as we get older. I guess sometimes older adults are reluctant or don't feel the need to seek help if they have sleep problems because they feel like it's a normal part of aging and there's nothing that can be done about it. But I would encourage people out there who perhaps are experiencing sleep issues to speak to their GP about it if they do have concerns and it's impacting their daytime functioning.
Yeah, great point. It's like we know that it can change a little bit, but you shouldn't suffer from your sleep. Yeah, fantastic. So could you also tell us a little bit about the links between sleep and dementia?
Yeah, so I guess there's been a lot of research evidence over the last decade or so showing these links between dementia and sleep. And, these come from large epidemiological studies that show that sleep issues in midlife are associated with cognitive decline in later life. Sleeping less than 6 hours a day is linked to a 30% increase in dementia risk. And this can be a little bit daunting, but I think what we need to sort of think about this is looking at it as sleep as a modifiable risk factor, a potential modifiable factor, something that we can treat and address to potentially reduce that risk. And we're understanding a lot more about the mechanism for how sleep might be impacting on our brain health. So there's a lot of growing evidence now about the glymphatic system in the brain, and this is a system that's potentially activated during sleep. And that helps to flush out sort of toxins that build up during the day, things like beta amyloid that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. And so if people are having poorer sleep, perhaps they're not able to flush out those toxins as effectively. Now, that's not to say if you have poor sleep, you're going to get Alzheimer's disease. But again, it's just trying to understand these mechanisms and are there ways that we can target sleep to try and improve brain health long term.
Yeah, and I guess the earlier we start focusing on our sleep, the lower our risk will hopefully be for developing those sort of diseases later in life. Fantastic. Well, we've got a couple of seconds left, but did you want to share any of your top strategies for improving overall sleep?
Yeah, so I think one thing is just not to get too caught up in your sleep. I think it's been a good message from Jazz and from Chris around, not focusing too heavily on our sleep, but at the same time recognizing the signs if there is a sleep issue and it's impacting on your daytime functioning, if it's impacting your mood, your ability to focus and concentrate, your memory, those types of things. If it's concerning you, then definitely, reach out to your GP and seek help. I think it's really important to build and maintain good sleep routines as well, keeping a consistent bedtime and wake time, and making sure you're getting lots of light in the morning as well to help reset our circadian rhythms. and just keeping socially and mentally active in those golden years of our lives. You know, we're so much more productive and active as we get older in this, you know, these generations. So we want to just be as you know, productive as we possibly can, and sleep is a big factor there. So that's the key message.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We got some really great information there. So thank you so much for sharing it all with us, Melinda. Okay, finally, we're joined also by Dr. Aaron Schockman, who is going to share with us his experience of living with narcolepsy type 1, what it means to live with a sleep disorder, and why understanding and empathy are so important in this space. So, welcome, Aaron. Please tell us a little bit about yourself to start off with.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron. I am an early career researcher at the University of Sydney, a lived experience researcher, so my research focuses on narcolepsy as well as actually living with sleep disorder.
Great, thank you. Well, would you like to tell us a little bit about what your diagnosis process was like when you were diagnosed with narcolepsy type 1, and is there anything that you would have liked to change about that?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, I first started to experience the symptoms of narcolepsy in the first or second year of university. So narcolepsy type 1 is an autoimmune disorder, and essentially the protein that controls when you're awake and asleep is destroyed. So for me, it meant that I was falling asleep throughout the day, feeling exhausted, fatigued, you know, throughout lectures, throughout social, you know, going out with mates and things like that. Also driving, I noticed, you know, I started to fall asleep during that, but also the nighttime sleep as well. So I started to wake up, you know, sometimes 40 times a night. So, you know, those symptoms kind of really led me to then go to my doctor and, you know, say that, you know, this wasn't normal. What can I do? What can I do about it? For the average person who has narcolepsy, there's a delay from when you first experience symptoms to actually getting a diagnosis of 8 to 15 years, which is a huge amount of time, especially if you are, you know, living with a sleep disorder like this. But overall, I think that the key thing to reducing that time to get a diagnosis is, you know, we need to get better at developing tools and becoming more aware as a society about disorders like narcolepsy.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And I think that's the same with many sleep disorders. There's not a lot of awareness of them within the general population and some medical professionals as well. So I guess how has your understanding of your condition shaped your approach to health and advocacy?
Yeah, definitely. So you hit the nail on the head. There isn't a lot of high quality information about narcolepsy and the broader kind of functional impacts and impairments that come along with a sleep disorder like it. A lot of healthcare professionals also aren't aware of it, and it can be very easy to kind of attribute or, you know, look at someone who is experiencing a sleep disorder and feeling sleepy through your own experience of sleepiness. So I think it's important, you know, being able to advocate for yourself, becoming knowledgeable, reading, and joining things like support groups that are out there to really connect with other people who are living with these disorders, and learning about ways to navigate the healthcare system in general. For example, you know, different kinds of treatments that are out there and how you can access them.
Yeah, fantastic. And then did you also want to tell us a little bit about your experience with stigma and sleep disorders?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it speaks nicely to you know, a few of the things that other panelists have said today as well. There's a common view, I guess, amongst Australians and Western society in general, that sleep's a bit devalued, isn't sometimes given the importance that it needs to be in health policy, and in, you know, health messaging in general. There's also the tendency to kind of attribute feeling sleepy throughout the day and falling asleep, needing a nap, things like that, to be synonymous with being lazy. So yeah, I guess one thing I wanted to kind of a key message is that if you are falling asleep throughout the day, you are experiencing, tiredness and it's starting to affect your day-to-day life, definitely speak out, speak to your healthcare professional, speak to a GP, and definitely get help, especially if it's starting to really impact your day-to-day life.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that links in with what all of our other speakers have spoken about today is, the best way of knowing if, how your sleep is overnight is how you feel the following morning. So I think that's a perfect spot to, I guess, finish our set speakers today. So thank you all for contributing to this discussion. I think it's been really enlightening and we've shared a lot of great information for the audience. So thank you all. And we have a little bit of time left for our Q&A. So we'll have a quick look at some of the questions that we have for you guys. I think what have we got here? So we've got one from Jennifer, and she's got here another issue that arises as we age is having to share a bed with a disruptive partner. So heading to a separate sleeping environment helps to prioritise sleep, but this is often seen as quirky or controversial, but it does need to be normalised. So the media has even coined the term sleep divorce to make the decision to sleep separately more dramatic than it is. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
I might start. I'm sure Melinda's probably got something to do with if the person is snoring and if they're a male, because often the female partner or the other partner identifies that to the doctor. What I did want to say is that sleeping in a bedroom is relatively a recent phenomenon. So humans didn't sleep like this for thousands of years. We slept opportunistically. We slept polyphasically, which meant, we were like Spain and we had siestas in the afternoon, so it wasn't all at night. There's lots of theories about that. We also slept in areas that were common sleeping areas, so there were people all in together. So when I talk, but I'm happy for the other panel members to jump in and say I'm wrong, but when I talk to people, I go, sleeping is individual. You sleep where you want as long as it works for you.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, completely agree, Chris. I think, there's lots of reasons why people might sleep separately, and rather than the term sleep divorce, maybe sleep separation. One of my colleagues prefers that term. I think it is becoming a little bit more normalised, and I think the more that we do talk about in the media is actually can be a positive thing. But yeah, as I mentioned, there's lots of reasons why people might sleep in separate rooms. May not just be because of snoring, but just their schedules may not align, or one person likes the room hot, one likes the room cold. There's lots of reasons. And I guess there have been some studies that have been conducted looking at bed partners and sleeping together versus sleeping apart, and their sleep quality is much better when they're apart. So for some people, it might be a good strategy to try in order to help your sleep health.
Yeah. And I think I've heard of some couples, they may go to bed and, they have that couple time beforehand and then move to separate beds later on to get better sleep overnight. So it doesn't have to be all night. Okay, now we've got another question here from Jackie. So she asks, how do we balance promoting sleep health awareness and the normalising that people are not sleeping enough? For instance, when the media says there is a sleep pandemic, does that make people more likely to change their sleep habits or simply accept it's a trait of modern life?
It's a good question, Jackie, because I don't think we know the answer, but I think forums like this is exactly to try to get the word out about experts. So I don't want to get into the politics of health because it's turbulent at the world right now, but forums like this is to try to get experts communicating with the public to understand what the real situation is regarding health, and in this example is sleep health. The media wants short-termism, and I've had people say to me, reporters literally say, if I don't sleep 6 hours, I'm going to die. I've literally had people say that to me. So it shows you they're looking for an angle. Sometimes it's not sexy enough to say it, that it's not going to be bad, but I think what we have to do is balance it out, like everyone said. So as Melinda quite rightly said, if you do feel you have a problem, talk to a health professional about it, and make sure that you get an answer that satisfies you, as opposed to just going, you need a bit more sleep. You think of all the things in the literature that, you know, just sleep on it, all of those phrases, it shows you the importance of sleep. So it's trying to balance it out with health professionals giving good advice, recognising that there can be problems and that sleep health is something that you need to look after, but stop being petrified by it.
Yeah, I think I'd just add one other thing, which I think is really important to mention when we're talking about this, because it is a big issue. And I think Chris is right in that we don't have the answer at this point, and it is a real concern for us that, you know, there's all this messaging around sleep, you know, catastrophizing and pandemics. And I think another thing that's really important to mention is just being aware of where you're getting your advice from. There is also a lot of people out there who claim to be sleep experts, and I think we need to be really mindful of that with the media. Promoting and you know, people out there on social media who perhaps don't have the credentials that they convey that they may have. So I think one of the messages I'd like to give people is just, if you're having a problem, as Chris says, really think about going through the health route, or look at who you're getting your advice from. You know, look at the credentials of the people that you're looking at on the internet, and make sure that you're getting it from credible sources like the Sleep Health Foundation, you know, so that there's loads of really great resources on the Sleep Health Foundation website. So just be aware of that and just try and go for those credible sources.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Jazz. Thank you. We do have another question for you though, Jazz. It's about development and sleep. So somebody's asked, particularly in under 1-year-olds, do you know if there is any links between development and sleep, in particular in regards to daytime naps? I don't know if that's, you know, multiple naps or not enough naps.
So this is a really interesting question for me, and I could probably talk about this for hours and hours. The short answer is that we don't absolutely know, but to give you a bit more information, you know, sleep is definitely a developmental phenomenon. So, you know, we know that sleep changes over childhood and into adulthood, and as you get age. We know that it's crucially important for development, and that what we see in your sleep when we look at it under sleep study observation, and we look at the different stages of sleeps, is that sleep is changing. So we know that babies require 12 to 16 hours of sleep, and then you go into older childhood and you go more towards your adult hours of sleep. So we know sleep changes, we know it's developmental. What we don't know is that how those sleep patterns differ depending on if there is a developmental concern, for example, or what comes first. We have thoughts, and there's a bit of I suppose, discussion amongst pediatric sleep professionals, that you see certain aspects of sleep different in children who have different types of development. So we do think there is a link between sleep and development. Napping is also really interesting. So we see some children who, you know, keep their naps for a lot longer than other children. And there's actually some big research going on at the moment to actually understand napping a bit more, and to actually understand whether the pattern of the way children change naps has any link to their developmental outcomes. So I think the answer to that question is that we don't actually know at this point in time. We know that sleep is definitely related to development, and we know that it changes, and that change is different, and there's different patterns. And I think that's something we're really interested in understanding more, so that we can actually see whether we could use sleep to understand more about what to expect for an individual child.
Yeah, there's still a lot we don't know about sleep, is there? So there's always ongoing research to find out more. Yeah. Okay, and I think we've got a question here for you, Melinda. What is your view on daytime naps for older people who don't get enough quality sleep overnight?
Yes, it's always a very big question. And I think napping is a great strategy if you aren't getting sufficient sleep at night. But the key is really nap early, nap short. So try and nap, you know, perhaps in the middle of the day, or in the, you know, earlier in the day if possible, and just keep it really brief. If you can just have a 30-minute nap perhaps, and that way you're not impacting too much on your circadian rhythms, and you're not impacting on your sleep drive, and therefore allowing yourself to be able to get off to sleep easily the next night. So I definitely think that napping is a good strategy to try. but just use it really strategically.
That's what I was going to say. Sometimes we call it strategic napping, don't we, to make sure it's not going to affect your overnight sleep too much. Great, thank you. We have another question from Renee, who asks, is sleep apnea dangerous and how can you overcome it, especially if you fall asleep at the drop of a hat?
Well, I might ask Jazz to answer this one as our physician.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Look, I think sleep apnea is a health condition. So I think that's the first thing to say. It is something that you really do need to see someone if you're having symptoms that are suggestive of it. Is it dangerous? It's dangerous in the sense that it can be linked to, for example, daytime sleepiness, which can then impact on your ability to function well in the day at work, to, you know, avoid, you don't want to have a car accident, for example, if you're really sleepy in the daytime. So I think it's dangerous in that respect. It also is associated with a greater risk of cardiovascular disease if untreated. So I think, you know, it's really important that if you're having symptoms of sleep apnea, that you don't ignore them. So, you know, if you or you're noticing a partner having symptoms, it's a really good idea to get checked out so that you can ensure that you get treatment. There's good treatments out there, and you know, people who do go down the route of having treatment, you know, from the experience of my father, will say that treatment actually makes them feel 100 times better than they ever realized they could, because they're getting better quality sleep. So I think it's really important from that perspective.
And Jazz, would you recommend if anybody snores or knows of someone who snores, should they all undergo a sleep study to find out if they do have sleep apnea?
I think they need to be screened to see what their risk is of sleep apnea, and I think, you know, that's different in children and adults. So from my experience in children, I would say yes, if you've got a child that's snoring for more than 3-4 times a week consistently, so not just for a period of the night but consistently, then it's really important to get those symptoms checked out and not ignore it. Similarly, in adults, I think, you know, it's really important if that's a regular occurrence associated with daytime symptoms. It may be that you need, more than likely you will need a sleep study, but I think it's really important. The first step is to be screened and to you know, to look at whether your risk is coming out as high as having sleep apnea.
Yeah, fantastic, thank you. And then do we have any recommendations for someone with a young child who keeps waking up during the night so they can't get unbroken sleep and are also awake all night?
Yeah. So the first thing to say is that this is really common, and this is something that I hear a lot, and it's actually really debilitating for parents as well, and often for other family members. So I think it's a really important question to try and answer. I think there's a lot of things that you can look at, and I think the first thing to think about if you've got a child who's having broken sleep through the night is, first of all, what I'd want to know is what age that child was. As I've mentioned, sleep is developmental. So some of a child waking through the night is actually quite normal, as they're trying to learn how to fall back to sleep. So we all actually wake through the night, and in children, they're still learning how to put themselves back to sleep. So what we need to do is understand, first of all, the age of the child and whether they're at an age where that could still be the case. And it doesn't mean that you ignore that. It just means that you have to understand that's a phase, that's a developmental period that they're going through. The most important thing during that period is to be really consistent with your messaging when they are waking. So, you know, if you've got two parents, I commonly see one parent will be doing one thing, the other parent will be doing another thing. So it's really important that the child's getting the same messaging all the time, that the child is, you know, for example, that they're not going into the parent's bed at one parent's letting them get in the bed, the other person isn't. So I think things like that need to be really consistent all the way through. Then it also goes back to a little bit what I was saying about what does your child respond to. For some children, just putting a bit of white noise in the room will actually help them get to sleep and stay asleep through the night. You've then also got to think about what happens when they first go off to sleep. So often we're thinking about a child who's waking through the night, but that child might actually be needing a parent to be in the room when they first go off to sleep. So if you need a parent in the room when you first go up to sleep, when you wake up in the middle of the night, you're going to need your parent because you haven't learned how to go off to sleep without your parent. So we need to think about that. And actually the focus then needs to shift on, let's first of all try and break that association with needing a parent there to get off to sleep at night. And then we should find that the sleep waking through the night will actually improve. So there's a lot of reasons why children will wake through the night. And I think it's thinking about all the different things that could be going on. What's waking them? If it's an older child, is it, for example, that they're getting anxious and that they're actually, ruminating and thinking over and over when they wake up, and that's why they're not going back to sleep? How could we deal with that differently? How can we offer them support? So lots of different strategies there that you can use, depending on the age of your child, depending on, the situation. So I think most importantly, again, it's about looking to get support from the right places. If you're really struggling, it can be really hard because you're exhausted yourself. And so trying to implement strategies can be really difficult when you're tired yourself. But, really good to ask for help in this situation if you've been struggling for a long time.
Yeah. And would a first step be a GP visit? Is that?
Yeah, usually a GP visit. There are also some really great resources out there. There's some apps that have been put out, for example, for adolescents. The Black Dog Institute has some really great resources for adolescent sleep. There's an app called Pod Squad, which is free to download for the public, that provides some sleep hygiene advice, things about what you can do with your child's sleep routine. So there's lots of things out there. Again, it's thinking about where they've come from, who's developed them, so sometimes going to your GP is the right first step because they can point you in the right direction to those things.
Yep, fantastic. Thank you. Well, we're just about out of time, but I'd like to thank all of our fantastic speakers for joining us today and sharing some of their knowledge and insights about sleep. We'd also like to thank all of our attendees and hope that you found this webinar useful and come away with at least one thing you didn't know or that might help you along your lifelong sleep journey. And we've got a slide up here that's just a reminder that the Sleep Health Foundation has a wealth of resources on the website. This includes scientifically backed fact sheets about all sleep topics. So please check those out if you want to know more about anything that was discussed today, or if you're wanting to find any more information about any sleep topics. We also have a QR code here for Sleep Central, which has a lot of information for sleep health professionals, and it also has a section of resources, including a CBT, a cognitive behavioural therapy directory. So don't forget to check out our other upcoming Sleep Health Week activities, including our final webinar in this series, which is on Friday at 12 o'clock, and that one will discuss how food impacts your sleep. So check out the website if you want to register for that one. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone. I think we'll finish things off there.